I'm actually feeling great for waking up at fucking 4:30. I feel fucking charged.
Here we go.
Really
Everybody, welcome to the Break the Rules stream. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov at LevPo on Twitter. It is a great pleasure to be here today with so many people rising up early in the morning with Styxhexenhammer666, Logo Daedalus in the house. Of course, my main man, Sultan of Swing himself, Giovanni Pennacchietti in the house. Giant R Productions on YouTube, and you can find me at LevPo on Twitter. Styx, Logo, this is it. This is a long time coming. The battle of the two wizards finally at hand. So, for those who don't know, Styx has been a prolific, amazing content creator. I'm not going to call you YouTuber anymore because you've went to all kinds of different platforms, and us too, by the way. We are simultaneously streaming this on Twitch, on DLive, on Odyssey. So go everywhere. I'm going to post all the links, patreon.com/breaktherules. Don't forget that as well. But anyway, Styx, I've been a big fan of yours for a very long time. You were on an earlier stream with us. Thank you so much for coming back in. And Logo, you have also been a very prolific Twitter creator, author of Carrie Trumbull's Blue Skidoo, and Ampersand, and anyway, it's a great pleasure to have you here. So before we get started with the first question of Magic, I want to just break down what your political positions are in a pretty short way. So Styx, go first. Let everybody know who does not know your political position. And everybody subscribe.
I believe in maximized individual liberty. It really goes no further than that.
There we are. Logo Daedalus.
I am a Christian, Republican, populist, but I would just call myself a communist these days.
There we are. Perfect. So let's get started with the Magic. This was the main thing, Logo, that you were bringing up. So why don't you go ahead and tell people what you think of Styx's views on Magic, and we'll go from there.
All right. So I think Styx is working perfectly well within a tradition of theosophy, which is just the tradition of basically Anglos, mostly Anglos, and the hereditary aristocracy in general in the 19th century. And a bunch of their secret societies and things like that. It was basically just a bunch of bored heiresses, baddie heiresses, and whatnot, and just general cranks and grifters selling old alchemical tomes and presenting them as if they had any real bearing on modernity. And it's mostly just bullshit, and selling a bunch of bullshit and like self-help and like positive thinking, positive thinking, sort of Norman Vincent Peale stuff. It's really no different from like faith healers or anything like that. It's a proud American tradition to go around selling little alchemical books and things to a bunch of rubes. It's like a carnival.
So,
Interesting.
Before Styx responds, would you say, Logo, that in terms of their impact, you would say the theosophy, whether you're talking about Blavatsky or Bailey or whatnot, but they probably did have they probably did have somewhat of a not insignificant impact on at least North American culture through the New Age movement and so forth.
Yeah, I think that stuff's all bad. Like, I hate New Agers. I don't like the New Age. I think it's like a dark evil. And it's based fundamentally in just like crankery and con artistry.
All right, well, there we go. Logo, your response. I mean, Styx, your response. I was distracted by the cat.
This is my cat's asshole. Yeah, I would say this. First and foremost, Logo. It's very interesting because you think that I'm engaging in the behaviors of the theosophists. Be clear, I'm not a theosophist. I have edited their literature some. And I've done this as part of a project, and I've spoken of this long term to try to make occult texts of all types more publicly accessible. Because when I first got on Amazon years ago, I realized a lot of the more inexpensive works there were just scans. They weren't properly edited. They weren't in a modern format. One of your fans actually complained about Occult Japan and being significantly shorter than the initial work. I've tried to tell people that's because in the 1800s, the format was different. It was double spaced, typically speaking. Here's the thing, though. When I edit these works, it does not necessarily mean that I agree with everything that they actually posit. All that means
I'm
is
not
that
saying
oh, I know that. But some other people have gotten that wrong impression. Just because I edit a bunch of theosophical works doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with the actual content therein. That's number one. Number two, that's primarily unrelated to my own beliefs. It's related to me in the literary tradition attempting to make them more accessible to people, because I figured you got two kinds of works on Amazon 10 years ago. You've got the cheap, shitty PDF scans, and then you've got the hardcover copies, which for someone like me at the time, of course, being very poor, it wasn't really accessible. I'm not going to spend $50, $60 for a hardcover copy because at the time I couldn't. It was impossible. I found it very, very funny that you claimed that I was adjacent to theosophy, though. You even claimed that I was basically one of them. Which is something that I've never claimed. You also claim that China invented alchemy, though. So
yes,
there's that. I think that here's the difference between us. You're a book reader. You're very, very profuse in that. And that's good, by the way. That's not a bad thing. You memorize and I analyze. Here's the difference.
No.
You go through books and you memorize snippets of them. Mainly for socio-political purposes, in order to back up your preconceived notions about the world in a very secular sense. Yes, you do. No. I analyze things. For instance, if you want to talk about encyclopedic book learning, it'd be wonderful to have a conversation about the history of fortune-telling works throughout the last several hundred years. But this is something that you don't understand and wouldn't be interested in.
I do. We can have a long conversation about all of these things. The thing that I would just say
because you're interested in the highbrow side, the philosophical side of things, as opposed to the so-called vulgar. That's really what it boils down to.
I mean, I read everything, man. The other day, like literally yesterday, I was just posting like Civil War, English Civil War satires of people writing poems. Just like literally, it'll be like found in a privy. Right. So it's like this idea that like I'm somehow like an elitist and I'm opposed to reading like the literature of the peoples or something.
Well, you seem to be based on your tweets about me.
Well, what I'm saying.
By the way, you gave me plenty of fodder. You gave me plenty of fodder for our discussion as well. That's a bad strategy in general.
I'm not afraid of anything, man. I'll give you all the fodder you need. It's not going to help. I would just ask, what distinguishes you from a theosophist? What is the difference between, because you call yourself an occultist. Are you like a practicing occultist? Do you do black magic ceremonies? Like, what does your practice look like?
I believe in the occult, but here's the thing. Here's the other thing. You take things that comport with your preconceived notions and you go forth spiritually thereupon.
Could you give me an example of that?
Let me please finish. I believe that the occult is a search for truth. And so when I go through occult works, let's say that we both read 100 books, right? You take bits and pieces out of that at least loosely comport with your socio-political dynamic, and you regurgitate them. And that's not a bad thing, because like if you're doing an AP test or something, that's what you're supposed to do, regurgitate knowledge from third-party sources. I like to analyze these things. I synthesize them together, and my worldview therefore changes over time, politically, religiously, whatever, in accordance with what is number one, pragmatic, and number two, what is historical. I'm interested in both. And my editing in works, which you seem to question the veracity of, you seem to think that I don't have a particular knowledge of the works that I've edited based, again, on your tweets about me. That's partially a labor of love endeavor to make these things more accessible to the public. It's not just for my own benefit. Some of these works, I don't make a return on them. If I edit some mid-18th century fortune-telling work, I don't expect to sell more than a dozen copies, but those copies are out there in the world. They're there for people to peruse in a form that hasn't been available, and sometimes for several hundred years. That's what I'm doing. The literature and the occultism are intertwined, but they are semi-separate in my goals.
You made a few claims, but number one, what texts specifically that you've republished weren't available freely on the internet prior to you doing that? Because you saying that name one of those texts that was available in paperback form that wasn't either shitty, paperback form. Okay, that wasn't either shitty, aka a PDF scan. I don't expect you to understand this because you don't re-edit works, or hardcover, which is much more expensive. The fact is that I've gone through these works line by line, redacted literally
by now got to be tens of thousands of errors in these works. Some of the spelling involved is atrocious, by the way, including in theosophical works. Added my own forwards, made my own cover art, and made them available to the public at a very low cost. And this is important because in some cases, my properly edited works are more inexpensive than the initial PDF scans that someone lifted off archive.org. I fail to see what the problem is. This is capitalism in motion. I've made an improved product, and I've put it out there for people to purchase, and then they purchase.
You shouldn't do what you're doing, but what I'm saying is that what you've effectively done is you've taken PDFs that were freely available on the internet.
Not
anyway.
Always. I've also transcribed works from my own collection. One of my first works was Occultism for Beginners by Dower, which I typed line by line myself from the initial manuscript on my own bookshelf, as well as one of Hartman's works, Healing Prayers, I believe it was called. I've transcribed works, I've edited works, I've authored my own works. I've done everything under the sun as part of my own project. But this is, I respect your project. Sort of
I'm not trying to take it away from you.
I was going to say that this is kind of surface level.
Yeah, that's not really what I care about. Like, I'm more interested in like what are your principles? Like, if I think that you are presenting yourself, Fred, as a very principled person. Like, you have a specific worldview, you have your principles, and you're saying that like you'll update your worldview for like new information. So long as but you're always maintaining like your principles, right?
My core principle is independence. I believe in the people being able to do what they do. And this is a very occult thing. It's like your worshipfulness for China. If you have an authoritarian government, like the Chinese government, which at a whim can ban any literature it wants, you can't be an occultist. It's impossible. How can you search for truth if you don't have access to everything to search through? It's like being told, hey, you can go through this archive, but you're not allowed to see this particular shelf because that one is verboten.
Before we get on to the China question, Logo, I know. Please.
They're intertwined.
I wanted to ask Styx and then you, Logo. What do you mean by this difference between, let's call it not profane, but let's say common, the separation between the philosophic and the common, or the I guess profane in occult literature? How is this delineated? Do you mean the actual ritualism is sort of a commoner delineation?
I mean more like you could look like historically, right? Like a lot of these texts that he's republishing, the ones that are like worth reading, like something like the Golden Chain of Homer or something like that. These are like medieval, or early, like late Roman Empire, early medieval,
you
or
mean
just
Renaissance,
like that general time
I think,
period.
But...
Well, a lot of it's not even at the Renaissance, though. A lot of this stuff was being written before the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance kind of comes out of the Hermetic revival, right?
That's what theosophists claim, that they're going
depending on the work.
Back. Yeah.
This is going to become a literary tradition fight.
It is. It is.
Now, Logo, what is your specific problem with the theosophists when you were talking about linking them to British intelligence and all that?
It's mostly that the theosophy is just like a complete bullshit, right? I think it's like a total fraud. It's not even like legitimately like alchemically or hermetically grounded. It's a total break from that tradition. And
which author are you talking about, though? Are you talking about the opinions of Blavatsky? Well, Blavatsky, I sort of gloss over in the most part. I'm much more interested in Judge or Besant, Leadbeater, some of these others.
What's the difference?
Well, they have different opinions.
On what?
They also have different focal points. If you look at theosophy, here's the thing about theosophical literature, and I don't know Lev or so forth. If you understand this, the different theosophists had different backgrounds in mind. And so like Besant, she went off to India. She declared her adopted son actually to be the next Krishna, essentially, which he didn't want to do. There's some spooky woo stuff there, but a lot of it is a study of the kind of literature from the East, especially, although not singularly, over time, and their analysis thereof. But while Besant was interested mainly in India, Steiner was interested more in, shall we say, Western occultism par excellence, as well as theater, music, things of that nature. He did occult significance of blood. He talked about various, Shakespeare especially was a thing. And over time they diverge. Of course, Steiner becomes an anthroposophist, splits from Blavatsky's group actually, in part because he fought with Besant. What I would say, though, is this is getting us bogged down in a debate, which I mean is almost irrelevant. I'm not a theosophist. I'm certainly not here to defend theosophy.
Yes. That's my interesting question. What differentiates you?
Well, I mean, I'm not a theosophist, so.
But like you're just saying that. I mean, what in your principles, your beliefs, your practices, like what substantially differentiates you from
the theosophists frowned upon the idea of black magic or of putting your will out in the world. I don't. That's
so you're more of like a Satanist or like a Crowleyan, like more into
trying to cast me as a devil worshiper.
No. I'm not. I'm asking sincerely because that's a real question, right? Yeah. Like, are you denying there's like a satanic tradition?
No, I abandoned Satanism long ago, although I still think that it's good for clearing out a person's mind, getting rid of false guilt and fear in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It can help. Here's what I would say, though. My occult study is very holistic. I look at all possible traditions because, unlike you, I want to read and absorb as much as possible, not just what goes with my preconceived notions. And I feel like that's the big differentiation between us.
How do you know that's what I do?
Well, based on your Twitter, which is what you're mainly known for. I get the feeling that your religious or spiritual meanderings are in some sense subjugate to your socio-political meanderings. That is, you have the pro-China, pro-Eastern Bloc, various cultural beliefs that you have, and then you go into the literature and you subjugate it to them, which is the opposite of what I do. I change my beliefs in accordance with what I believe is pragmatic.
You say that
an absurd, a cursory view of your Twitter, in which
so based on a cursory, you called me like a reader, like a prolific reader, right?
You called me a weed smoking racist liberal.
I'm not. I know. I'm fine with that.
Based on no apparent understanding of my personal beliefs. I haven't smoked weed in 10 years.
I mean. Okay, that's fine. But I'm just saying, like practicing occultist, or I don't know if you'd call yourself a practicing occultist. I don't know what I'm allowed to call you, frankly.
You can call me whatever you want, but that's subject to me rebutting it.
You saying that your number one value, right, is independence. Would that not be a liberal value?
Technically speaking, what does that have to do with weed or racism?
Okay, well, my question is what? Well, I mean, I'm not trying to cast.
There you go, sputtering.
Anything
wrong? It begins.
I have. This is my brain. People always complain about me not finishing sentences or saying like or whatever. But it's a bubbling thing here, and I try to find the right words, and sometimes I have to.
Well, Logo, you're always in between a thought. I noticed, like that, your discourse is inherently in between thinking about things.
That's not a bad thing. I tend to do that. I'm not trying to.
I'm not trying to like call you out for like your personal mannerisms.
Well, you did.
Like I think that's pretty lame. No.
No, you literally did. You called me a racist on Twitter. Not even 12 hours ago.
Are you not a race realist?
In what sense? How would you define that?
You don't know what I mean by. We both know. Do you
mean are there different groups of people that are semi-divergent because of their geographical non-proximity to each other? Yes. Do I give that a civic meaning?
Is that biologically determined?
Yes. Does it have a civic meaning?
So you're a race realist.
No. Does it have a civic meaning? Because I care about civics. No.
So you think that? So you were saying effectively there are these like distinctions in races, but you ultimately believe in the fraternity of man?
Yes, I believe that individuals are all human beings.
Where does this fraternity come from your value of independence? Why should there be fraternity?
Why does that matter in the biological sense? And by the way, how is race different from saying subtypes of Homo sapiens? The thing is, you're delving into linguistic propaganda.
I'm not trying to propagandize. I'm trying to understand what your position is, and like I need you to define it so that I can like have a discussion.
Okay, let me answer that. Right. First and foremost, why is the term race in the colloquial sense? I'm not talking in the sense of biologism or anything like that. In the colloquial sense, is not race shorthand for simply different groups of people who are phenotypically different based on a cursory observation of the externality of the way they look. For instance, groups that are black, groups that are white, groups that are Asiatic in group.
That's not really the scientific distinction, right?
But the thing is, nobody out there cares about the scientific distinction. When they talk about race, it's something totally different. And this is the difference between us. I care about the colloquial, the vulgar, if you will. what actually happens in reality. You care more about the book learning side of things, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the day-to-day experience that people, generally speaking, actually experience.
Oh, wait,
You're a man of the people?
Yes.
Well, we do have to...
Logo, let me say...
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, Logo, I wanted to get back to Theosophy and your opinion on Rudolf Steiner, but I'm curious, Logo, where you're going with this, because to play devil's advocate, you've also... let's say hung around with some pretty insidious people back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'm not trying to bullshit by association or whatever, because I mean, I'm from the same sort of circles.
But you reject any sort of racial thinking around identity. Is that what you're saying? Because to me, that's not the logo of 2016 or 17 or 18.
Yeah, but from what I see here, Styx is not saying that there should be some component that he sees in race that's going to determine an outcome. Styx is a civic nationalist, as far as I understand. You are much more for whatever people bring to the table. That's what counts.
I believe in individuality. I do not care about the race of a person. The fact that race exists, I don't even know what it has to do with magic.
But we do have to move on. Speaking of that, I want to cover the China question. First, the China question in relation to what Logo said with China coming up with alchemy. So, Logo, can you give us a little bit of insight on that part?
Related. Yeah, well, some people say that Chinese alchemy predates that of European.
There's a lot of good evidence for this. But the tradition of alchemy from the Taoists, right? This is what moves across the Silk Road and enters into the West as Hermeticism.
Oh, and also, can I ask you?
So Ayurveda never existed. Have you ever studied any of the?
Do you think the Chinese had any contact with India?
Have you ever studied Ayurveda, which predates, China being anything other than a bunch of stilted houses on bamboo slats, with regards to some of their chemical preparations?
Are you talking about like Vedic stuff, or like what specific what time period are you talking about?
Ayurveda, thousands and thousands of years ago. Traditional Hindi medicine predates anything that the Chinese developed.
How do you know? Like, you don't think there was Chinese medicine at the time?
Oh, I'm sure that they munched on herbs like everyone else in the world was doing. The Indians had a categorical system. This was even noted by the European explorers. Oh, they had a categorical system of minerals and herbs before we did. No, this is astounding.
So did the Taoist alchemists.
Thousands and thousands of years.
And it's roughly the same time period.
Well, it's not alchemy in the sense that the average Westerner would define it, because alchemy in the Western sense tends to be the medieval tradition.
Yeah, of course. But what I'm saying is that as time has gone on, there's been more evidence for what I'm saying, right? Like because
also,
China
why is it meaningful?
Why it's just
because
either
of the
historical
Chinese
or
supremacy
not.
With regards to
I'm not a Chinese supremacist. Like, what I'm saying is that I think that the People's Republic, right? If I'm a populist Republican, then you'd think that I would support something called the People's Republic, right? And
that's like saying if I hate fascism, I would join Antifa.
Well, I think that Antifa, I think, are just like kind of like the actual like fascist tradition. I mean, they would be considered social.
So you disagree with the label
Marxists.
as applied to them, but not as applied to China. I wonder why. What about the Democratic
China's
People's
a communist
Republic of
country.
Korea? What about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea? Is it a people's republic, or is it essentially a one-party oligarchic state?
It's not an oligarchic state. I don't know. I mean, I'm not as interested in defending the People's Republic of North Korea.
You won't even defend your
I'm not
point,
that interested in it. Well, I don't think they're the same thing.
But you'll defend China as a people's republic.
Do you think they're the same?
As a one-party system.
I have no problem with the one-party system. I think it's better than our fake two-party system, frankly. Because if you think about it, right? We basically have a one-party system, right? But it's split into two parties.
False.
You don't think that's true?
No, I do not. Here's what we actually have. We have neoliberals and neocons that are similar, but we actually have groups outside within the parties, such as populist libertarians and even the far left, that deviate from that. Magically, unlike in China, they aren't thrown in jail.
Yeah, but sorry, Styx.
They might be suppressed by corporations.
But what sway do they have within these political parties? Like, let's first of all, I wanted to address this claim of alchemy to get back to it. can we define, and this is shout out to my boy Modern Hermeticist, can we define Hermeticism? Can we define the origins of that? Logo, you're claiming that it comes from China, whereas Styx, you're claiming that the orthodoxy more or less comes either from India or Europe or Indo-Aryan European.
No, I'm just talking about alchemy with regards to the idea of chemical preparations in that sense comes from the Indus Valley civilization predominantly. Although
who invented gunpowder?
Why does that have any bearing on alchemy whatsoever?
Do you think that was one of the things produced by alchemists?
Well, who developed baking soda? If you're going to fixate on one specific chemical preparation, of course, we can say in the general sense, it's agreed upon that the Chinese were first. That's like saying, well,
where do you
Europeans,
how do you think they did that?
Developed chemistry because they developed nitrate powder.
What I'm saying is, how do you think they developed gunpowder?
By observing piles of compost, mainly. When you piss on straw, you can grain saltpeter from it. It's actually very simplistic.
What I'm saying is, why? How did they create a means of a recipe for such a thing?
Like many other people in the world, like the Babylonians, Sumerians, and the Indus Valley people, they experimented.
So they had sort of an alchemical tradition.
Yeah. No, but that's also why, Styx mentioned, why are we focusing on China?
That's like saying that the development of boric acid or of nitrate gunpowder or of any other chemical preparation gives you the idea that you're the inventor of alchemy. Well, I mean, no. If you fixate on black powder, I suppose the Chinese developed alchemy.
You would need. Well, there we go. Okay, so you need the alchemical tradition.
Gunpowder is not the first chemical preparation.
To be fair, by the way,
there were archaic Homo sapiens making beer. So the fact that they made beer, they made alcohol. So Neanderthals.
Alcohol comes from alchemy. They have the same.
Wait. To be fair, alchemy.
Saying that the Neanderthals of Southern Europe were the alchemists, not the Chinese.
Hold on 1 second. Just to be clear, the word alchemy. Does not the word alchemy mean from Egypt? Al-chem? Yeah. Chem is the word for Egypt. So why are we even talking about China if we're talking about the progenitors?
Although technically the term is partially Arabic in derivation as well as Greek.
There we go. So there's Arabia, there's Sumeria, there's all kinds of places.
But it seems like you're fighting over, but you guys are fighting over the alchemy as practiced as a primitive form of chemistry, not the alchemy of, say, what Jung observed as a spiritual practice.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what we define as alchemy. If it's the Western medieval tradition, it's European. If we're talking about gunpowder and certain other preparations, it's either Chinese or it's from the Indus Valley or possibly Sumeria, Babylonia. If we're talking about chemistry in the sense of people not even necessarily understanding the preparations and simply making some sort of brew, it predates any recognizable human culture and dates back to before the Copper Age.
So Logo, where would you personally place then the definition of alchemy, putting it to where China, putting it to China?
I would say that it's a dialectical view of nature.
Very interesting.
Okay, so
almost like communism.
So why would China be why would China be the first when it comes to the dialectical view of nature as opposed to any other location?
The Taoists made the dialectic the center of their cosmology.
Styx.
What does that have to do with the development of gunpowder long before?
Because it's about the synthesis of two
but if
things
the dialectic
in order to
did not
produce
exist, so the dialectic didn't even exist when the gunpowder was invented, but somehow it's the result of something that became loosely the foundationism of communism.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that the dialect. Are you familiar with Taoist literature?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Lao Tse.
So you know that how it's dialectical, right? There's there's the yin and the yang, right? There's the two fundamental forces.
Again, though, that postdates gunpowder by a very large number of centuries.
It actually predates it.
That depends on your interpretation of certain literature and when it was actually founded, based on the fact that Lao Tse's writings, in the general sense, there's no 100% agreed upon date for it, actually.
Exactly.
And by the way, there could have been the use of
pre-Socratic.
and there could have been the use of gunpowder 1,000 years before, and we wouldn't necessarily know it until the writing system was developed. Lao Tse's works on bamboo scrolls are up for debate as far as even the interpretation, as far as the earlier writings go.
What would your definition of alchemy be then? Because I gave one.
Again, it depends. Well, I'll give you two definitions and you can take them and run with them. The first would be the Western tradition, alchemy as an overarching categorical pre-chemistry subject. The second would be just chemistry in the general sense, and occasionally interpreted in spiritual ways. That would be Chinese, Indus Valley, Sumerian, it doesn't really matter. So you can run with either of them.
But logo,
That's not really so much a
alchemy was
definition.
alchemy technically wasn't invented by any singular culture, though. But you're trying to.
I'm not
give
trying
China
to
credit.
say. I'm not making the claim
you're
that like
explicitly
nobody has
attempting to
ever
give
had ideas before,
You're
and like China
explicitly
invented
attempting to
ideas.
give China credit because of your socio-political meanderings.
No,
And your
no,
attempt
no.
to subjugate spiritual beliefs. You're attempting to insinuate the supremacy of Chinese culture even before communism to the spiritual in order to enforce your modern day beliefs. Which is anti-occultism,
anything
by
of
the
the
way.
such. I'm
that's
very
what it seems.
anti-occultism, so that doesn't really matter to me. But what
You're
I'm
definitely
saying
not
is
anti-China, considering your Xi Jinping meanderings.
yeah, I mean, I do think Xi Jinping is the greatest statesman of the 21st century so far. Do you disagree?
All right, let's
Yes.
talk about
Well,
that.
no, I want to question Logo on something. Having studied, I know this sounds cringe, having studied Taoism both at the academic and outside of academia, dialectics is not something, a term I would use for Taoist thinking, whether it's Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi. It seems that they were rebelling against the dialectical thinking of core Confucians. I just, it seems maybe there's validity to what Styx is saying in terms of you trying to transpose the dialectics of, say, Maoism back to to Taoist thinking. I don't know, Logo, if dialectics is the right word here. I don't know.
What would you? I mean, if you want to proffer a better description, like go for it.
It seems that Taoism is quite anti-dialectics in a lot of ways. Maybe not on a level that you're speaking of, but in terms of the sort of rigidity of a system.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Sure. Logo, if you're anti-occultism, or are you anti-spiritual as well?
Spiritualism, yeah, I'm against spiritualism.
Then why even bother referring to Lao Tzu, who clearly believed in spiritual things?
Because it's part of the development of, like, you know, self-consciousness and time, right? Like there's different stages that we've gone through.
So do you? Well, I mean, is that an ascended stage? Like spirituality was a good thing at the time, and then, you know, because of your communism, now we should be secular?
Well, I'm not really like secular per se, but what I'm saying is that if you were to like subscribe to, like, say, like a Bronze Age cosmology in the 21st century is nothing but like a affectation.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a Taoist. I wouldn't go around being like I'm an Orthodox Taoist and like I'm pretending that I live in, like, you know, prehistorical China or something. That's not really my point. My point is more to look at like where these developments came from and like what their actual like material historical.
So it's more the history for you. It's more the history.
Yes, I'm a historicist.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, but Logo, you still believe in a metaphysical order. I mean, you claim to be a Christian, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I think history has a huge role to play in the metaphysical order. I think that's actually one of the most important things about Christianity, is that it brought history into like the metaphysical order.
So do you believe that like you would go to hell if it weren't for Jesus or something? Because that's
yes. I mean, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Without the truth, without having faith in the eternal truth, is a way of going to hell. I mean, I've seen it happen.
So
to
then,
people.
why do you admire the Chinese state with its state atheism?
Because we have state atheism here too. That's just republicanism. It's about the separation of church and state.
That's not the same as state atheism.
Well, do you think that there's no Christians in China?
Oh, there are. They're a suppressed, unfortunately, minority.
Do you know what the what is it, TPM or the CCC are? There are a lot of state-sanctioned Christian churches that have
as long as they don't go
tradition.
up against communism. So if they interpret the scripture in a way that Xi Jinping doesn't
so
like,
how
it's a
about
problem.
how about if you interpret scripture in a way that the U.S. State Department doesn't like? Like, so let's say you start up a Ruby Ridge. Like, is that allowed here in our free religious society?
Trust me, as a former Christian, trust me, there are plenty of churches that preach against the gospel of current politics.
For sure, but what I'm saying is,
for the most part, they don't
they're
go
separatists.
Ruby Ridge.
No, but
For the most
what
part, they
I'm
don't go
saying
Ruby Ridge.
is if they're separatists, if they're Christian separatists, and they deny the legitimacy of the government, and they build their own institution, they're generally taken out by people like the FBI. You know, like, would you say that's absurd?
That doesn't explain why the Mormons exist then.
Yeah, I was going to say the Mormons
had
are almost integrated into the security state.
We had wars with the Mormons for years.
Yeah, they're still there.
They tried to wipe them out.
I know, but they changed their policies so that they could be recognized.
No, if you want to see suppression, you'd have to look at a state like China, not the United States.
I don't see the suppression.
You don't see any suppression in China?
I don't.
So Tibet doesn't exist.
The Tibetans, have you asked the Tibetans how they feel about their subjugation?
Very interesting. I'd ask them, except that the Chinese government wouldn't be very, very happy with that now, would they?
Why? You can go on Weibo and you can talk to Tibetans. There's a lot of Tibetans.
No, I can go on Weibo and potentially talk to people that may or may not be from mainland China. In the other sense, and be
so there are no
agents.
Ethnic Tibetans or people from Tibet
considering
who are
the
on
rural
Chinese
nature
social
of many
media
parts
platforms.
Of Tibet, I doubt there are many of them on there. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that China did for Tibet is that they brought them a lot of modern infrastructure. So they in fact do have running water, and they have electricity, and they have the internet, but they didn't before that.
Congratulations to China! You gave people running water. That's
pretty important.
Something
that's
rare in the world. Yeah, I know.
Well, they didn't have it before.
Well, Styx, to play devil's advocate, someone like Logo or other people have said that the Chinese have liberated, I don't believe this, by the way, but the Chinese have liberated Tibet from a brutal theocracy, and that in some ways they've liberalized the Tibetan government.
They just destroyed feudalism. Like, it was literally a society where if you were not part of the aristocracy, you were just a slave.
Yeah,
you were considered like not even a real person because you're in like the lower wheel.
Yeah, but you've got that now. If you're not an insider in the Chinese Communist Party, you've got the same problem.
That's not true.
There's still a caste system in China. It's called the social credit score, and they're trying to export it to the West.
What do you think is the difference between a social credit score and the credit scores that we have in the West?
When did I say there was a difference?
There is differences. There actually are differences. So I would hope that you would know the differences.
Yes, in China, it's ideologically based. In the West, it's partially fiscally based.
Okay, but what is having a low social credit score?
If you're expecting me to defend the Western banking infrastructure, then you found the wrong person.
You won't, of course, but I don't really. But like, you will defend them ultimately, opposed to China, right?
No, absolutely not. I think that they're
too
similar.
You. There's no difference.
No, I think the problem is that the West is becoming too much like China. That's the problem.
And what have we adopted from China?
Well, the social credit score exists on social media. We're on YouTube right now.
So wait, so you're saying a reputation score? A reputation score for internet posts that exists? Like, that's existed for a while, actually. Like, a lot of moderating.
Yeah, and that's adopted again. That's adopted from China's system. It was first adopted by Facebook, based in part on that. And it's very unfortunate.
I don't think that's exactly true. I don't think it was adopted from China. That doesn't really make much sense. It literally
was adopted. The Chinese were murmuring about the possibility of a system like that almost a decade ago.
You don't think that we were talking about that here? I mean, we have a credit score system. Like, have you checked your credit score? Do you
well,
have
I mean,
score?
that's a little bit different from being able to express yourself or not based on whether the government thinks you have right think or not.
Well, so here you can express yourself based on whether or not YouTube or Facebook or whatever believes that your content won't challenge their profitability or the
and there are
their
private alternatives. But in China, if you try to use a site like BitChute, you might get shot. Therein lies
but you don't need to use a site like BitChute because they actually don't have as much censorship on their own social media platforms, which is why a lot of
that's completely false.
Well, if you want to criticize the Chinese state,
have you ever tried? There's a text out there that talks about Tiananmen Square and Falun Gong and stuff. Have you ever tried posting that in response to a Chinese bot or shill account? They immediately go silent because they're not allowed to interact with it.
Tiananmen Square is pretty bullshit. And it's just a Western intelligence operation, and that's why the Chinese don't take it that seriously, because they know the actual history. There
were never any people that were actually protesting the Chinese government.
That's not what I'm saying. There's people protesting the Chinese government, but actually the people protesting the Chinese government are the types of people who you would generally be opposed to, right? There's a bunch of college students. There's a bunch of like.
Why would I be against a bunch of college kids?
Well, because when they do that
I did go to college.
Well, this isn't.
I'm aware, but when they do that here, when they do that here, these are like the Berkeley type students who are like rioting for maximum liberalization, right? And you find those
Not
people
always.
detestable.
Not
I do.
always. I have no problem with young people protesting. I think it's wonderful. I just wish they wouldn't burn Wendy's to try to make a statement.
So
you gotta get
the
a
DSA
fucking hamburger.
Do you support the DSA?
What?
The Democratic Socialists of America, for instance.
No.
Like, let's say there was a DSA protest, like you support them.
They have the right to protest like any other group of people as long as they're not destroying property.
Okay. So you're effectively so you are a liberal. Like you support like public street protests.
Call me what you want. Yeah, the right to protest is wonderful. If you want to go and protest westernization or my occult views, you should have the right to sit on the street corner with a sign, and then I can protest Xi Jinping.
Well,
but the problem is, if you go to China, you can't do that. If I call him Winnie the Pooh, which is what he looks like, in China, I could get arrested and put in the gulag for it. No one's going to arrest you for doing that in the West.
Good. I mean, you could get in a lot of trouble in the West for talking about the actual reality of our government structure, right? Like you say, you're like someone like Michael Hastings.
Then why do
Julian
I have
Assange.
Then why do I have almost 500,000 YouTube?
Because you don't actually threaten any. You don't actually talk about the truth or the reality of our situation.
Sure,
you actually run cover for it, and you actually defend it.
Well, no, because your truth is taken straight from China. You're saying we need to be more like Xi Jinping. On Twitter, you explicitly retweeted. Actually, I think the last thing you retweeted on Twitter was somebody else posting, we have a choice in the West between Xi Jinping or the Facebook monopoly or something along those lines.
That's pretty true.
What a false
dichotomy. We either create a people's republic where we own these things and the state good, and we have the power to say like, keep the oligarchy in control, and we make them the servants of the people, which is what they do in China, where if you're a tech billionaire, you do not have the power that a tech billionaire has in the West, and you are kept in line by the state in order that you promote the good of the people themselves. I think that's good.
But that's the good that is determined by the government. But as history has shown us, giving the government that kind of power is usually a bad thing.
I don't know what you mean by the government, because here, would you call Facebook the government? Because I think it's effective.
No, it's government co-opted.
Is it co-opted, or was it partnered with the government through DARPA and things like that from the very beginning?
No, it's partnered in the economic sense. It platforms.
I think it's partnered in the infrastructural sense.
I think there is an argument to be made that the infrastructure came from government sources.
It literally did.
No, but Logo,
in part it did, and that's part of the problem is that these companies are too closely tied with the government. Why would I want the government to completely stranglehold them and subjugate them entirely? Because then, that would be even worse.
Because you don't trust our government, do you?
No, why would you?
I agree. You shouldn't trust our government because
neither do I trust the Chinese government, and that's the difference between us. You think that those guys' government is okay because you don't have to experience it.
No, I think it's better because of the outcomes that it produces for its people.
Environmental degradation, human trafficking, organ harvesting.
I don't believe in the organ harvesting thing.
Well, that's because
the concentration camps thing is a total cope.
Yeah, you don't believe in it because you believe propaganda from like RT or
you believe propaganda from the Epic Times and from Falun Gong and from the Voice of America, but I'd be interested
Voice
in
of
seeing
America.
The sources.
Oh boy, do you not know anything about me if you think that I believe in that shit?
Well, I'm just telling you that this is where most of the China Watcher stuff comes from, right?
Well, Logo, people in the chat are accusing you of denying that Tiananmen Square happened. Are you denying that Tiananmen Square happened?
I have no problem with how the Chinese responded to Tiananmen Square.
Well,
but Logo, you think?
But that's because you're an imperialist. You just believe that China should be the world
believe in
power.
the state. Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe that the state should
you
exist.
think that China should run everything. So if another group of people doesn't like China and doesn't want, like if the Taiwanese are like, no, fuck that, we don't want to be commies, you probably wouldn't have a problem with an invasion.
Taiwan has been recognized the one China policy, that Taiwan is a part of China and that it is not an independent government, has been.
I agree in reverse.
I
believe that China is West Taiwan. And the United States
that's a very epic
Reddit
meme, but it's not real.
Well, it is. The United States
no, it's not. It's not
based
in any history.
Until the end of the 70s, the U.S. government agreed with me.
Yes, because the U.S. government was using Taiwan, and it still does use Taiwan as an outpost for a lot of shady shit. Like, do you really want to defend the KMT's government through the 90s? Like, it was literally under martial law, and you're ostensibly
My
against like
goodness,
this
shady
power of the
shit.
state, right?
Every powerful regime in the world engages in that sort of horse crap. But the thing
Wait, so now it's okay.
The thing is,
now it's just
oh no,
normal.
I'm not saying that that's okay. I'm saying that you will whitewash the sins of China if it engages in similar behavior.
I don't need
like
to
it does in
whitewash
North
anything.
Korea. Well, there's
It's not the same
definitely
regime.
plenty. Yeah, there's plenty
it's the
to
same
wash
regime?
there. No, I think
it's the same
China's
regime?
worse. No, it's not.
I think
China's
China's
way
worse than North Korea.
Yeah.
On what measure?
China actually has a functional military and bullies its neighbors. North Korea is basically a non-entity. Oh, let's see. South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Pakistan,
China's bullying
India.
Japan? China's bullying Japan right now? How are they bullying Japan?
Don't you remember when they had a fracas a few years ago? Japan off its coast found a bunch of mineral sludge in the deep ocean and wanted to vacuum suck it up, and the Chinese tried to claim it. Don't you remember that? That was like
is that bullying, or is that just like a general sort of dispute that happens over like resources and boundaries?
They tried to, much like with Vietnamese fishing vessels, they tried to ram them out of the region. I don't think it worked, but this happens all the time.
What's wrong with that?
Why is it that all of China's neighbors, other than the Russians, don't like them? Is what
because they're associated with NATO and they have deals with us.
Why is it that Canada and Mexico don't generally have a problem with the United States? Why is it that the
because
US
we're all part of
neighbors,
the
other
same
than
government?
Cuba, yeah, well, loosely.
Well, we are part of the
Atlanticist. Yeah, it's a good one.
Order.
It's the Anglosphere, like it's literally like with the same.
Mexico is part of the Anglosphere?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's true. I mean, what do you think that like we made like NAFTA? Like, what is that?
You're actually claiming that Mexico is an Anglo-Saxon country?
It's under the dominion of the Anglosphere. Yeah, it has been for a long time, man. Like that's what.
How is that the same as being part of the Anglosphere? Wouldn't that be a subjugate?
I'm talking about hegemonically. Like I'm saying that they're subservient to.
What's wrong with the U.S. running things? The U.S. is way better than China.
I think the U.S. running things has been a disaster specifically for Americans.
And I think that if China were running things, 100 years from now, people would be saying the same thing.
China has no desire to be a unipolar global power. That's actually not what they want. No, it doesn't. Of course it
does. Yes,
it doesn't. Why?
Yes, it does. If they didn't, they'd be weak. They'd be cucks. Every major player wants to rule the world.
So you either want global government or you're a cuck.
No. Every country wants dominion. It's sort of like the Ring of Power. They all want it. Over everything. But China doesn't have enough of a navy to pull it off. That's the only reason why they're not doing it.
So you think that every government has the goal of global governance?
No, every major government.
Every
government you can consider a truly major power, from the British on in history, the Russian Empire, the Romans, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the United States, the Soviet Union, China today. They all want more. Because the nature of humankind is to appropriate more resources to oneself, and this extrapolates itself to the level of post-individualism. If they get to the point where they don't want to expand, they contract. Rome learned this the hard way when it started building walls instead of sending legions out to subjugate the next tribe. Well, China will learn this the hard way in the near future as well, by the way.
I don't believe that China is an imperial power or has any desire to expand or rule over the globe.
Then why is it consistently colonizing East Africa? Why did it move
It's not colonizing East Africa. It's providing loans,
There are
political
loans. Parties in parts of East Africa that exist solely to kick the Chinese out. Why did it build a major base in Djibouti? Why did it move into Nicaragua? What about the String of Pearls? Why is it constantly having border skirmishes with India and Pakistan?
Because India and Pakistan are associated with the Anglosphere, and we want
India's part of BRICS. India's part of BRICS along with China. So why do they still have skirmishes?
Because like this geopolitics, man, like there's skirmishes all the time between
geopolitics,
nations.
Man. I've got no explanation because Styx
like
is right.
it's like why are we trying to why are we fighting with all these other countries over like rights to
we're not fighting with Canada.
We do. We fight with Canada over a bunch of shit.
Okay, we don't have border skirmishes over a few miles of pine trees in the Canadian
wilderness.
Did
in the 19th century.
It's not the 19th century. I know as a
Yeah, because now we're all part of
up.
we are all part of the same order now. We used to not
I'm
be part of the same government.
but I'm
as
asking why
Canada.
China and India, even within the last year or so, have had border skirmishes despite being part of the same economic alliance. This is something that you do not see in the West. They squabble, they have diplomatic crises, but they never have border skirmishes. I don't see Viktor Orban invading Slovakia, you know? It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not really understanding what you're saying here. Like yeah, because we're part of the same global order. Like, yeah, we're not going to go to war with Canada because we're actually part of the same global order.
So when China and India are part of the same globalist order, which is BRICS, which is essentially, it is an Eastern Bloc form of globalism, why do they still fight over where their border is, including with Pakistan?
What do you mean that BRICS is a form of globalism?
BRICS is a multinational collection of different groups that are posited together for economic and diplomatic purposes.
Like China, India, Russia, Brazil.
Yeah, well, Brazil loosely at this point. So why then are multiple BRICS members still fighting, even while they build infrastructure in one another's countries? China's building infrastructure in Pakistan, antagonizing the Indians, despite the fact that both countries are part of BRICS. I mean, it's imperialistic dysfunction. Fighting?
Because there's things that people disagree about, like, all the time, like in countries, and how do you like solve these disputes?
Yeah, but the U.S. disagrees with Mexico every day, but we never fire across the border. We don't say, hey, we're going to conduct air raids.
Yeah, we do soft
Monterey.
Power. We go in with like clandestine ops, and we go in with like black ops, and we go in and we fund like guerrillas and things like that. We don't go in with our army. It's not like done out in the open.
When those black ops happen, there's a reason they're not public, because technically they're not authorized. And
they're authorized by our extra legal police force.
But wait, let me ask Styx. There was something that Logo said before. It seems that there's kind of a slipperiness with your position. Now, Logo said that he believes in the legitimacy of the state and state actors, but it seems that you're making quite an individualist claim. So do you believe in the sort of, because you're not an individualist anarchist, do you believe that the state has the right to exert their will on their own people? And also, do you not think that these Anglosphere countries have a undue influence via soft power on other nations of the world, up to and including Africa, the Washington Consensus, and so forth? Just to, defend Logo a little bit. I know the chat
is this a question for me?
Yes. Do you believe in the primacy, the sort of legitimacy of a state, and do you believe that these Anglosphere countries are also exerting their will over these countries, especially the African continent?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that China's not doing anything that the Western governments don't do, but the difference is I'm willing to criticize them when they do this, and I feel like Logo doesn't criticize China when it engages.
What's the point of criticizing
behavior.
it? If like I don't understand. Like, you're saying you condone it and you think it's inevitable, but you just wag your finger at it. That's the point. That's what you
I
pride
oppose
yourself
all
on?
forms of world policing. I oppose all forms of warmongering. But the thing is, between us, here's the difference. You wouldn't do so if it were China. If China were to attack one of its neighbors tomorrow, you would make excuses for that attack. Exactly.
I wouldn't care.
I do care. That's
Why?
the difference between us.
Why do you care?
Because it impacts the world. Everything is interconnected, as you've yourself stated, number one.
So
and
you're
number
saying...
two, because I believe in the primacy of the individual. No, I don't want Tibetans to suffer. I don't want Mongolians to suffer. I don't want Africans to suffer.
Wait, hold on.
Trust me, there are billions of people in the world that are.
Let's break this down a little bit. Logo, you're saying they're not suffering. Can you give us any details as to why you believe this?
Well, we're suffering. There's people suffering. Life is suffering. Like, what do you mean by people are suffering? I don't think that the Chinese have subjugated or in a way that is super egregious or something. And as Styx has even said, they're not doing anything that Western powers haven't done. And what I'm saying, my contention, is that they're actually doing this in a more humane way. For instance, when they give loans for development to East Africa and various other places, they actually give much better rates, and they're actually more forgiving of the debts owed to them than, say, the IMF is, which is why the IMF doesn't like it.
Dysfunctional countries that won't be able to pay them back. They're willing to guarantee.
Do you know how many of those debts they've forgiven?
Yeah, they're willing to give those handouts to countries that they can then subjugate thereby. The IMF just has a higher standard with regards to credit rating. It's the only difference. So China's literally acting
China
like
is
so you're congratulating China for acting exactly like the Western governments.
except better. I'm saying that they do it with better terms.
No, they give better terms to countries that wouldn't meet the terms of the IMF.
Do you know how many times they've forgiven loans to these countries?
The US does that on a regular basis.
Okay,
and
so
it's
what's
just
the problem?
as sleazy.
Okay, so
well,
you're
Logo,
against
wouldn't you say that there has
too.
been noted human rights abuses in places that the Chinese, for example, the mines that still have children and so I know the West has done this, but wouldn't you say to Styx's argument that the Chinese are equally guilty of exploiting these peoples that don't have an ability? I know people from Ghana, for instance, that are very critical of the Chinese regime and what they're doing currently. And wouldn't you say that they're very self-serving they're more open about their self-serving nature than a lot of like the
I don't think it's really self-serving.
Western,
It's kind of just realpolitik, right? Like if you want to build infrastructure projects that extend across the globe, and for instance, like the IMF is not interested in building high-speed rail networks that connect Eurasia. That's actually actively against the interests of the IMF, right? So how are you going to get these things done? And if you think these things are ultimately good, which I do believe that having like a high-speed rail corridor through like the Belt and Road Initiative would be a good thing for the globe in general. Like, how do you get such things done?
Well, you don't need commies to do it.
Well, apparently you do.
No, well, that's the other question. Once, let's say, China goes into various parts of Africa and so on and so forth and gives these loans, are they doing it out of the goodness of their heart? I think we can all say they're not. But
I don't really care about their like the sentiment.
No, it's not about. Okay, it's not
so
about.
You don't care about the abusive nature of the Chinese government at all.
Do you think all governments are abusive? Do you think all governments are abusive?
No, some of them are just cocked. But here's the thing.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
In some parts of the world, there is an attempt to curtail the abuse, at least because of public initiative. At least,
do you think there's any public initiatives in China about, say, corruption within the state, or by changing laws that they think are unjust? Do you think that they
there
have
doesn't
any
seem to be. It's
like
a little bit like the Soviet Union in the '60s, I suppose.
Well, the thing is that the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party actually had a major split in like the 50s.
I'm aware of this. Also, the Chinese invaded Vietnam twice.
Yeah. How many times did we?
Once.
Just once? I mean, I guess.
Very
if you don't want to talk about like the Indochina wars and things like that, like you don't think the Americans were involved?
Very, very interesting. Who's the warmonger now?
But
I'm just talking about history. I don't know.
To Logo's point, though, Styx, wouldn't you say that, and a lot of people, even sensible, quote unquote, liberal people, are making this argument that a command economy and a technocracy like the Chinese possess, that they have an ability to exert their will of the people over and above that of the bogged down late empire Western, quote unquote, democracies? What would you say to that argument, that the Chinese have an ability to exert themselves and the will of their people at a greater capacity than, for example, America at this point?
I would say that having that more efficient capacity means nothing if it's not actually in the benefit of the people. I would say that long term, their system will inevitably fall to the same victimization, the same corporatism that the Western model has fallen to. It's already happening. The reason why China is successful now is because the Western world abandoned its hard line approach and tried to bring China in through trade. We instead of embargoing and blockading and so forth, as we had prior for decades, we said, hey, we'll give them Coca-Cola and pretty soon they'll be capitalists. What happened is that China inevitably abandoned its initial Maoist line, which appears to be something, Logo, that you, for some reason, think is a good thing.
Haven't.
They did. There is a facade. Yes, there is a facade free market there, where as long as you toe the line ideologically, you can get all sorts of preferential treatment. And I would point out as well, enormous numbers of people in China, they're not employed by Chinese people, they're employed by Americans and the British and people from other countries. Because China decided to attract foreign investment from capitalist countries. Interesting.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's lots of money flowing in, but it's all coming from capitalism. Well, China didn't build that.
What do you think? In the words
of Obama,
I don't think you understand
you didn't
Marxism.
build that. You
I don't think
didn't
you
know that?
understand. I don't think you understand Marxism, because actual or like
Yes, I do.
Marxist-Leninism.
Marx was a moron. I understand that.
Well, okay, yeah, you're smarter than Karl Marx. Okay, but
Absolutely, 100%.
okay.
Well, Logo, let me ask you something to contextualize this, because last time you were on with Amy Therese, you had this complaint that we didn't really get into the nitty gritty of the genealogy of the Chinese state in terms of their Maoist and then later Dengist leanings. So how would you disagree with Styx in terms of the development of current Chinese thought and how they govern themselves? Do you still think that they've retained their Maoist roots? And what does that even look like nowadays?
Yes, the whole point, really, because Mao primarily is a Republican, right? Mao was trying to create the Republic of China when
and
the
what do you
Qing
mean
dynasty still
republicanism?
existed.
For people who don't know, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like a system of government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Abraham Lincoln defined it, right? Which is actually where Mao gets his definition of a republic as well, because through Sun Yat-sen and a lot of American, collaboration, this is what inspired them. I mean, Mao Zedong specifically says that he was inspired by George Washington.
But wouldn't you say that Mao was repelling various Western backed forces such as Shanghai Czech that was explicitly backed by America? Wouldn't you say that Mao was operating in antithesis to that sort of Anglosphere empire?
Well, they were actually on the same team for quite a while, right? Like Mao and Chiang Kai-shek worked together. The distinction comes from like
they got rid of that, from what I understand, in modern China as far as history goes. They don't like talking about Mao's
I don't know if that's
forays
true.
with the
some of
KMT.
those terms are banned actually in China.
Like what?
Hmm?
What?
Oh, I've got actually a little bit of spiel here. Here, let me look it up. Actually, I've got a little notepad file.
While Styx is looking up, everybody subscribe. All the people who are listening to this, we are going to have Hotep Jesus coming in next Tuesday, and then we're going to have Uber Boyo and Jonathan Pinjou coming next Thursday.
And Patreon.com/breaktherules. Please
break the rules. Patreon.com/breaktherules, and also Jason Riza Giorgiani with Uber Boyo the week after. I'm gonna post all the links there. Be sure to go there.
Oh my God, that's gonna be a bloodbath. No,
this is a hot week. This is a hot week. Everybody subscribe. Anyway, Styx, go for it.
Yeah, here's some things. The Tiananmen Square protests, the Tiananmen Square massacre, the anti-rightist struggle, the Great Leap Forward, the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, human rights, democratization, freedom, independence, multi-party system, Taiwan, Formosa, Republic
I'm
of
aware
China,
of this
and
copy
so
pasta.
on through.
It's like
Well,
a copy
it seems
pasta.
to work. Yeah, it's because when Chinese bots are trying to talk to you, if you post that, they're not allowed to interact with it, so they have to shut up.
So in America, the equivalent would be what? If there are things you can't say on American social media
not giving
platforms?
kids puberty blockers. I don't know. That would
it'd be like, oh, like I think that maybe
this
Pfizer
works
and
in private
Moderna are a little sketchy.
as well. This works in private messages as well. So, yeah, initially it was developed by a Japanese person tired of spam emails.
Do you remember when they were that there's a lot of articles recently that they're looking to add fact checking to text messages? Do you remember? Do you see that? So is there any?
So we're several years behind China in adopting the same methods, and I think we should go in the other direction away from China.
Do you think that we're not going to adopt those methods?
My hope is that we don't, and of course I don't do text messages, so it doesn't affect me.
Do you realistically believe that we're not going to do that?
I think there will always be providers that don't do that.
Like,
unlike in China, we have choices. You see, we have more than product A and product B, both of which are red.
No one uses VPNs in China.
No, if they want to go to a gulag, I guess they can try.
Well, that's the question.
Have you seen anyone get sent to a gulag for using a VPN? I mean, we have a gulag here, man.
I wouldn't know because the Chinese aren't allowed to use the mainline internet.
Yes, they are. If you just use a VPN. The thing is that like it's really not that complicated. It's just that the Chinese don't have an interest in using our internet because they have their own internet.
Again,
like the same way you don't have an interest in using their internet.
I wouldn't know how to, and no, I'm not interested.
Exactly, and they're not that exactly, and they're just similarly disinterested in ours.
Yeah,
because they
don't use no Chinese person ever heard of YouTube.
No, they don't. What I'm saying is they use Bilibili. They have their own. They don't use Facebook because they have their own platforms.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not buying that.
All right. Well, I guess
you don't think they have. What do you specifically? Okay. What do you?
Oh, they have their own platforms. I'm just saying they've definitely heard of the Western platforms. They're not completely.
Do you think there's more censorship? Do you think there's more censorship on Bilibili or on YouTube?
Bilibili, probably.
Do you believe that? Do you think that, like, for instance, like putting out like a conspiracy theory documentary about 9/11, do you think that would be censored more on YouTube or on Bilibili?
They're not censored on YouTube. There's a million of
Yes,
them.
they are. Yes, they are. They're absolutely
They're
censored. A lot of them
still
get
there,
removed.
dude.
They're
Also, there are other
I
sites
watched
like
them get
Odyssey
removed.
and Rumble. There are other sites
Okay.
like Odyssey and Rumble that'll host
So
that.
not on
anyway.
YouTube, though.
But Styx,
No, but
would
the
you
other-
say
have
that?
the other
question-
Oh, sorry, Lev, you go ahead.
But the
Go
other
ahead.
question is what happens to a person when they do share these things and when they do go against the government in China. I know, Logo, you were bringing up the point of Michael Hastings before. Again, that was a personal thing from what I understand with him in the general, and honestly, I still don't know what the hell happened here, so even me talking about this is still making assumptions. But you're comparing that to something that would happen to regular people who would voice dissent against the government on a regular basis in China.
You would have to
But
show me a specific case that you actually mean, because this is kind of just like we're talking about something,
Okay,
and I'm not
so-
so sure that this exists.
Okay,
so you'd have to show me.
So according to you, then China has the best interest of the people, and when it does censor, it only censors for the good of the people, for the good of society.
I'm
Would
sure
that
there's
be a fair-
mistakes. I'm sure there's mistakes, but there's censorship here too. I don't really see
Okay,
a
so according to
distinction.
you, then the degree of censorship in the United States, you'd say it's far more, and the problems that people get into with having their rights violated in the United States is far more than it is in China. And you know this
What do
based on
what do people in America, like for instance, if we're talking about the Anglosphere specifically, what are you going to get censored for? Criticizing
matter?
our own institutions, right?
No,
Criticizing our institutions.
when you say censored, Logo, you may have a video that is not on the site anymore, but it's not the same as having police go to you and take you somewhere
Do you think
else.
that?
No,
Do you
but-
think that happens to anyone? Because that's happened to people I know for things they posted on the internet. So this idea
Alright,
that this
can you
doesn't
give me an
happen in the
Some
example?
West.
people, you know, posted like terroristic content because they're not going to get.
No,
the
no, no,
police
it does-
looking
you
into
don't-
them
you don't
for
have to
9/11
post
defend
anything.
Logo. I
You
would
don't have
say
to do
that-
anything. You just have people calling the FBI and saying that you did something, and they have to go check in on you. That's what
That's
happens.
totally different from the government of its own initiative doing the same thing unperturbed.
But
How do you
Styx, would
know
you say that the British
difference?
government is doing that currently to its citizens, jailing people for quote unquote homophobia? Like that's
But
actually happening.
but that's the whole problem. The whole problem is that the Western world is more closely resembling China. That's the
so
whole
do you
problem.
think?
The
Do you
problem
think
is
that they were like, we're
I
going to
don't-
take
I do not-
anti-homophobia legislation from China?
I-
Is that
I
what
do
you think
not-
happened?
No, I do not disagree with you that censorship is wrong. In fact, I'm sure that I'm more opposed
Right,
to it
obviously.
than you. Here's the thing. The West is becoming more like China. That's the whole problem.
I
It
don't
doesn't
think
matter if it's-
censorship is wrong.
It doesn't. Well, that's, you know, your opinion. And thankfully, there's no censorship in the Western world to prevent you from saying that.
There is
which
censorship
something
in the
that-
Western world. It's just a bad form of censorship.
Now, here's the thing. What's the difference between censorship of homophobic content, racist content, and censorship of communism? There is no difference. It's all censorship. I stand against it
There is a
all, and that's
difference.
another differentiation between us. No, there's not.
there
Censorship
is.
in all of human history, never once can you find an example of censorship that was actually for the public good. And this is why I oppose Chinese
Okay.
censorship.
What
same
about
as I
the
do
banning
don't
of
know about
pornography?
that. That's-
What about
that's-
banning pornography? Is that in the
I don't
public good
agree
or
with
not?
that. No.
Of course not. You're a coomer.
Yeah. Well, there. I mean, there you go.
By the way,
Buzz,
Styx,
Buzz,
how-
Buzz,
wait,
Buzz,
Styx,
by
wouldn't
the
you
way,
say-
it's
wait,
finding
wait,
original
wait,
pornography on
it's
the
not-
internet not going to go very far.
Wait, it's
considering
nine-
the content.
it's 9:10 a.m.
China's banned pornography.
Hold
I think
on,
they
hold
did a
on.
good job of it.
Hold on, everybody. Styx,
Yeah, and I'm
it's
sure
9:10.
that means there's no porn in China. That's legit.
Wait,
Well, you'd have to
Styx.
use a VPN, right?
Hold on,
Well,
everybody.
there you go, and you encourage.
Hold
that.
on. Sticks.
Yeah,
It's 9:10
I do
a.m.
encourage
I
that.
want to make sure. How much time do you have right now? Because it's 9:10. I want to make sure we're
Like
good.
five,
So you have
like
super-
5 minutes or so.
Well, we have
Okay.
super chats.
Yeah,
so-
we got to go to super chats, but this was a very interesting conversation. Everybody, once again, please subscribe, keep this going. Patreon.com/break the rules. All right, everybody, it is super chat time. Here we go. Okay, and please send more super chats as we're doing this. So here we are. Okay, 1 hour ago, we have from G.A. Korobov. $5. Logo, Lishenko pill, this Angloid 666 dude. So, Lishenko, I don't know, Logo, real quick, can you say something about Lishenko?
I mean, I think that like the presentation of what Lysenko is actually doing and what like the reality of it is are two different things. It's like a whole different conversation. But basically, like I don't know what he did wrong exactly. A lot of like his research into Mendelian inheritance and like epigenetics is being adopted now, and we're kind of like developing more in a Lysenkoist direction at like the deeper levels of science right now. So basically, history will show that the Darwinists, the neo-Darwinists specifically, are in the wrong. They just are not scientifically
agree with
correct.
I agree with that.
Styx, any response to that? I don't know if you're familiar with Lysenko or not.
I'm familiar with epigenetics. Initial Darwinian evolution, of course, needs to be tweaked.
All right, moving on to
Cool.
And science is being manipulated in the West.
Agreed.
Now anyways.
Agreed in part. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, next we have keeping America afloat, $4.99. Does everyone agree at least that hundreds of millions are dead, directly resulting from communism?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
I don't get it, Logo. That's kind of wild.
No, but
bro.
Logo, you defend Chairman Mao, which I really don't understand how. How can you have
well,
faith
Logo,
in
can
somebody
you stay
who
on
has
a bit
same
longer
reason
than
with power?
Styx? Can you stay on a
People
bit
would say
longer
that,
than Styx?
yeah, I'll stay longer, but for the same
Okay,
reason
then,
that I would support someone like Abraham Lincoln, right? You could say like, oh, look, there are hundreds of thousands dead due to Abraham Lincoln and like the Civil War. Like they should just let like the South like secede, and then there wouldn't have been war, and like there wouldn't have been death. Like, oh,
Based-
Dude, Mao
same thing.
lost a war against sparrows, dude.
he won, and he built China into what it is now.
No, he declared war on sparrows because he erroneously believed they were eating the corn crops, and then locusts bred out of control, and 30 million people starved to death because he was an ignorant retard. That's what happened.
I mean, do you think that? What do you think the Dust Bowl was here? Like, do you think that like there's never been
Did
government
30 million
policies
people
here?
die in the Dust Bowl? I thought that was the result of private industry, not state. So
I don't believe there's a distinction.
State policy?
I don't believe there's a distinction between private industry and the state. The private industries are actually just granted like monopolies, charters. Like if you look at the history of corporations, they're created by the state.
You're talking about modernity, and the Dust Bowl was a long time ago. A little bit different.
I know. Well, the Dust Bowl was like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's roughly the same time as
a drought
the Chinese Revolution, right?
So a drought plus bad farming methods is the same as killing all the sparrows and killing.
Well, there was
30
actually
million people?
there was a collapse of the whole global market at the time, and there were famines and things, and just problems with the allocating of resources globally.
None of which were the result of killing off the sparrows. Just to be clear.
I mean, are you saying that the collapse of the global market was not as much of a factor as killing sparrows?
No.
I think what's
so. What do
all
you?
the grain
I don't know
died.
what you're trying to say.
The grain was killed by bugs because General Mao decided to send all the Chinese people out to clang pots and pans until all the sparrows killed themselves.
So what Styx is saying is that a decision that was made from top down, from one person, resulted in all these deaths, which
that's
you
the
cannot
problem
say
of
is the
central
same.
planning.
So
okay,
but Styx, wouldn't you say that FDR? Some people argue that. Was it FDR that prolonged the Great Depression by however many years? The Austrians certainly argue that.
Yes. Well, he was also a friend of Stalin. What does that tell you? If we're talking about the
well,
connection
Lev, I know
FDR
with
was
your
also
John Birch
FDR was also a bitter bigot who put people in concentration camps because of their ethnicity,
Oh, wow.
including lawful U.S. citizens.
Wait, that happened here? Wait,
and he
we had
would've
concentration camps here?
And he would have probably
And the
You
state
can call them.
did this?
You can call them. You can call
Are
them
you
internment
serious?
camps. You can call them
Wait.
internment camps if you want, but they're the same exact thing.
Wait,
Right.
but
We put
we
people,
did that
The
here?
United States put people. Yes, a socialist president put people in camps.
Oh,
based on
FDR
their
is a
ethnicity.
socialist?
Yes, self-proclaimed.
I mean, I think he is a socialist, but I think our system's socialist, and it has been for over 100 years.
I think that it's regrettable the amount of socialism in it. I think we need to go in the opposite direction.
We need to go
from
back to the
China.
19th century.
Well,
we need to go
Logo,
back
Yes,
to...
yes, absolutely.
Logo,
You want to go back to the
preferably
Victorians, right?
No,
Back to the
no, I want to
Victorian
go way back
policies.
beyond the Victorians. Yeah.
What do you? Okay, yeah. So you actually don't support our government right now. You support what, like 17th century government? Like what?
I
what form of
support the
government do you
United
support?
States as it is meant to be. I do not
What's that?
support globalism.
What's the United States as it's meant to be?
Freedom for every person, a recognition of the Constitution, and that individual supremacy should be taken heed of.
Do you
I
think
do
that the
not believe
founding
in
fathers
colonies.
believed in individual supremacy?
Absolutely.
They did not.
they did.
Absolutely not.
Sure
No,
they
they
did.
absolutely did not.
Well,
They were not.
Styx-
They were not.
Wait,
they were not
Wait,
independent.
Logo.
I wanna see
Logo,
your homework
hold
on
on,
that
hold on,
one.
hold on, Logo.
Yeah,
Can you give
they
us
Read
an
the
example?
Federalist Papers, dude.
Logo,
I have
can
read
you
the
give us-
Federalist Papers.
Can you give us an example
very
right
well.
now of the founding fathers not being as much for liberty as Styx claims?
I don't know. No, they're. What is liberty? Liberty
So
is
he
not.
can't give an example.
No, I am giving an
Huzzah!
example. Let's talk about John Adams, for instance. John Adams is not an individualist. Okay, all of these people believed in republicanism, which meant that you wasn't about individualism or individual rights per se. It was about the rights of man and about about having a government that represented the people, that was composed of the people, That was the whole point.
And where did the Constitution, where did the concept of the Constitution come from, if not protect those individual liberties? Have you read Paine? Have you read the rights of, have you read the Rights of Man?
Yes. Do you think that individual liberties are collective property?
Not humanity. Man, okay, singular.
So the king, right? A king, if you're a king, then you have ultimate individual liberty, right?
Arguably.
Yeah. Okay. So this is about not an individual's rights. It's about the rights of individuals in a society.
It's about the individuals as components as opposed to a singular individual. Have you heard of the NAP?
Do you have rights if you do not have a state which defends your rights?
Yes. If you can enforce them by force.
How? Okay. So you have what? Weapons?
Grog the caveman bashes the other caveman in the head with a stick if the other caveman attempts to rape him in the ass.
Okay, but
that's very primitive.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, why do we have rights? Do we put them in a public document?
The founders would believe that it came from God. As a Christian, you should understand that.
Yes, and they believe that the state also came from God, correct?
It can be inspired that way. That was how it was interpreted.
I'm asking what the founders.
It can either be. Well, it depends on whether it's properly incepted, and they've literally made that in their debates.
Yes, exactly. So a legitimate state,
yeah.
A legitimate state is one that actually represents the people, right? And it defends the rights of the people, right?
Yeah, and if there's no individual rights, then it's not defending those rights.
Well,
exactly.
You need an organized structure capable of fielding force. It doesn't have to be a state. If you have a republic, it will be. Technically, it could be anything under the sun. It could be a democracy, theocracy.
But Styx, what concerns me the most with Logo's statement is that, Logo, if I'm not mistaken, you want to put all that responsibility into the hands of one person like Mao or like Xi Jinping, and you're expecting
No, I want to put it into the party.
Okay. That's even worse. Then you have a partisan dysfunction.
All right, moving on.
We have partisan dysfunction.
But wait, Styx, when you say that,
super chats. There are a lot of super chats. We got to get to them because I know Styx has to go soon. Yeah. So real quick over here. So, but Gio, also I want get your question as well. I want to make sure that.
No, I was just going to ask Styx. Wouldn't you say the founding fathers conceived of liberty and individualism differently than how we conceive nowadays, and they had much more of a filial duty towards each other. They had much more of a communitarian way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's just pragmatic because back then they didn't have like modern medicine and things like that. So naturally the family, especially family-centric especially, would have taken precedence. Absolutely.
So are you more in favor of like something that's not based in like the model of the family? Like you're more interested in just like the individual, like in isolation?
Oh, I think that they're both great.
Which one's better?
What's interesting, by the way, I recently learned, having to do with Confucianism, that it turns out, if I'm not mistaken about this, that the precedence was on the family and especially on the father, where you weren't even allowed to betray your father to the government. So the father was more important than the government, which is, I kind of like that. But anyway,
it's pretty based.
We have GA. No, but again, Logo, the point here is that now the government has precedence over the father. I mean, especially like in the USSR, there were these heroes of the Soviet Union because they told on their parents to the KGB.
The same's true here. Like that's part of modernity.
Yeah, there are people that tell on their parents.
That's very dishonorable.
All right, moving on here. We have a GA Korobuff again. Question for Styx. Is wearing a leather jacket over a Hawaiian shirt a result of libertarian Anglo alchemy?
Yes.
No, it's just a result of having good style sense.
All right, another one from him, $5. Question for Styx. What Chinese intellectuals do you read? Do you have any critical knowledge of China beyond Western sources?
Lao Tse, mainly. I'm not as much into Confucius, but I typically focus more on Western occultism, actually, simply because that's what's more available.
Z112, $4.99. Chinese operative or probably don't want their Chinese visa to be taken away, clank. Another
Logo, do you have a Chinese visa?
I mean, it's really funny that everyone thinks that I'm like getting paid or something. That
I don't think that.
No, I don't think that at all.
Very
I just
silly.
think that it's funny to mention it.
All right, next.
But what's funny about it?
It's hilarious.
Why is it funny? It's not funny to me. Like it's just annoying to me.
Because I don't care if it's annoying to you. Because China
I know you
pays
don't, but I'm saying
all the time.
Who?
Millions of bots. Those are cheaper though. I don't think that you're paid by China because humans actually want a livable wage.
All right. Next
Yeah,
we
I mean,
have, G.A.
their
Karabov.
propaganda also is very different than like what I say, right? When the West, like their propaganda is mostly done by people like who they send to like Western schools and they come back and
it's
they're
more
trying to
coherent.
like, no,
All
it's
right,
actually
next-
less coherent because it doesn't like their propaganda
I'm just
outfit doesn't
dude, I'm
really
just trolling you.
isn't
I'm
that
sorry.
strong. Oh, I'm
Well, in
sorry. I'm being
Canada,
Next we
serious
have
and
another one.
genuine with you.
We gotta go through their super chats. Next we
Yeah.
have another one from G.A. Karaba, $5 Styx. Would any rational person not want to put guys who wear Hawaiian shirts under leather jackets into a gulag?
Yeah, I'll go to the gulag as long as I can grow crops instead of mining rocks. I like plants.
$5 Miles.
We'll keep that in
Kinslow.
mind.
Yeah.
$5 Miles Kinslow. Hey guys, which books reading best explain your philosophy viewpoint? Also Clank.
Wait, what? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Which books best describe your worldview?
Yeah.
Also Clank.
Oh, Sickness and Hell, which I wrote myself.
Logo,
There we go.
you?
Logo.
The complete works of the visionary prophet, William Blake.
Yeah,
There we
that is. I would say Logo would pick that. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
very Logo.
And honestly, even if I disagree on pretty much everything with Logo, I am a big fan of his taste in books. I really appreciate that.
Logo,
that part of it.
I specifically disagree with Blake's take on Revelation, specifically chapter, was it 12 that introduced Mary again? I think that William Blake had a very Gnostic view of
We gotta.
Revelation.
I
don't
don't
know.
All right,
we can talk
we
about
gotta
that
keep
at some
going.
point. But
Okay,
Sorry,
next.
we'll talk about
Chad
that, yeah.
Scott, $4.99. Styx. He's obviously a commie. He'd willingly let the government take his mother and father if it were good for the state.
Well, then
no,
he-
I don't
but
think
then
anyone
he-
would do that.
Well, then he'd be just like the Democrats in the U.S., admittedly.
Yeah,
so.
right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no,
I
I actually
think we
believe
agree
in
on that.
filial
True.
piety.
Next, Chad Scott, $4.99. Oh no, I read that one. Okay, Right Flag, $20 Canadian. Thank you so much, Right Flag. Question for Geo: wasn't Logo indicated in doxing some dissidents such as Scott Greer? Why are you collaborating with him?
Not really. I mean, how is Scott Greer getting doxxed when he goes by his own name? Like, that doesn't really make sense.
Well, his personal information was leaked, Logo, and people have implicated you and.
Oh, really? I had nothing to
friend
do with
and-
that. I don't fucking dox people. I'm like, I haven't doxed anyone. Like, I'll do
Well-
research into people who are already like public figures or whatever, but I've never doxed anyone.
All right,
right. And I would just want to say, like I said in the chat to who was it, Red Flag or
There
Oh,
are
to
a
someone
lot
in
of
chat, I'm not
spurious
hiding in
claims.
darkness. It's literally like 5 a.m. here and the sun's
I
rising. right
I
now.
condemn all doxing, and I just
There are
want to make
always
clear that
spurious claims like that, like about him or anyone else. Everyone has
Yeah.
claimed to be a doxer and weird. And
right. I just want to say that BTR is an impartial platform. We've had many people that I disagree with, certainly the people that Lev have disagreed with, and that I don't, just to make clear, I don't condone any doxing no matter what, regardless.
Yes, same here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, final super chat. G.A. Karaba, $5. Styx is totally ignorant of China beyond Reddit Falun Gong memes. This
That's
is
pretty
joke.
true. Yeah, that's pretty true. Yeah, it's
All right,
pretty.
I don't use Reddit. I use 4chan, so I'm much more enlightened.
It's the same thing, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean,
got-
they can't use Reddit in 4chan in China. So.
Good. I would both of them. They're fucking.
I would
Yeah,
ban
another
shitholes.
good Chinese person. You should move to Beijing.
I know. I think it'd be for the public good to get rid of Reddit.
I
and 4chan.
think-
like, are
yeah,
they good?
that's-
Are you going to defend these as
that's-
public
That's a
goods?
good way
Like,
to
I'm
start
not.
a civil war. Just to be clear.
No,
Well,
Logo. The
before
weird thing here.
Styx goes, Logo.
Wait, real quick.
I want.
The
Well, I
weird-
want. Yeah, go ahead. Go. Sorry.
real quick, the weird thing here for me again is like, I think the position here almost seems like you are willing to have a dictatorship over people that you don't like, over organizations you don't like,
Over criminals and
but you
people
don't
who hurt the
apply-
public good. Yeah.
But you don't apply that same principle to yourself. You never.
I'm a
think
good
that
What if
citizen.
I think you
I don't
hurt
break
the
the
public
law.
good?
I don't break the
What
law.
if I think you?
What if
what
somebody
I think
tells
you
on
hurt
you?
the
What if
public
somebody?
good?
Yeah.
What law have I broken?
It doesn't matter. A neighbor could complain and say you were saying bad things about Xi Jinping. Then what?
You
But- well, they'd have to
criticized
prove it.
Ron Paul.
No, they wouldn't have to prove it. They didn't have to prove shit in Russia. And I'm not going to go on the
Yeah, they
Russia
Wait,
did.
rant,
Styx,
but
You
I'm
don't
just
think they
saying-
do investigations? Like,
No, they
I don't
don't.
know.
That's the whole fucking point.
Wait,
I'm
Logo,
gonna
you
make-
criticized
I'm gonna
Ron
make a
Paul,
country-
Logo?
I'm going to make a country that's
criticize
just
everyone.
like China. It's just like China, but he's breaking the law because Ron Paul is our Lord and Savior, and he
That's
insulted
actually what
him.
I want to create. Actually, I'm a Ron Paul Maoist. I think if Ron Paul was more serious about wanting to create a republic, he would study the communists.
Heresy. You're a heretic, so off to the gulag. 10 years farming rice.
Do we have gulags here?
Well, I guess we'll have to create them. When I become president of the United
What about our
States, we'll do
prison
that to
system?
communists.
Do you think our prison system is better? Is like a gulag, or is it totally different?
Oh, it's like a gulag, yeah.
Okay, so we have a gulag, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree.
very much is.
I'm not going to defend the U.S.
Do you
prison
think
system.
who do you think has a higher percentage of their population in prisons, America or China?
According to official numbers, the U.S., although China
Okay.
cooks the books, so we're not exactly sure, but they're both excessive.
Okay,
Yeah.
but do you
Yeah.
think that like the infrastructure of our prison system is like just larger than the Chinese prison system's
I
infrastructure?
think that the U.S. prison system is horseshit because half the people in there are in there for things that shouldn't be crimes because I'm a
Yeah.
libertarian.
Oh yeah, I agree, man. I think our system is totally horseshit. But what are you going to do about it? Like, how can we change?
We're gonna take out all the nonviolent drug offenders and jaywalkers and stuff, but commies in there instead. This is what I promised.
I kind of agree with you. I kind of agree with you.
games
The thing is,
in
the
the-
thing is that I agree with you because I think communists, like Western communists, are actually just anarchists, and I think most of them are just like criminals.
They're
who
radical
should
liberals,
probably
in
be
my
in jail.
opinion. They're
So
Yeah,
again,
they're radical
everybody-
liberals. So we
you don't
actually
like
agree.
Vaush? So you don't like Vaush?
No, I hate Vaush. Vaush is a social fascist.
Okay.
I would put him in the
Well,
gulag.
Okay, well then we found one
Yes.
thing that we agreed upon.
See, actually,
All
you would
right.
You'll need
actually,
an extra
you would
life,
actually,
but
you'd
you'll
actually be
need-
treated better under my regime than the
Yeah.
regime we have right now.
Or
I
mine.
wouldn't,
You'll need
I
an
wouldn't
extra
really want to
large
send you to the
cell.
I think
gulag.
our hatred of Vaush is uniting us in this debate.
Yeah.
So that's
All right.
I would
with
send
that-
the thing is, man, all these people who you're talking about Western communists, et cetera, et cetera. How do you want to actually discipline those people and like force them to like have to work in the interest of the people instead of being these like degenerate, craven, like individualists? Like, because
No,
I
I would just shut off the welfare spigot and they'll all die.
Wait, Logo,
they can't survive without their tendies.
what would
and
be
government funding.
what would be your job? What do you think the government would have you personally do in this regime that you're thinking?
I
of?
would love to be like a civic servant of some sort. I think that in a communist regime that people like me and people who are like more serious and more like patriotic and like believe in the public good would serve the state better. Whereas in our state, I'm not looking at the meme, but in our state, we select for people who are treacherous and actually betray the public good for private interest. And that is what our system's based on, is treachery.
So, Logo, you would say that people like the Varso cells and the Zero Book cells, that
They're
they're
anarchists,
ideal-
they're social fascists, they're reactionaries, they're revisionists. We'll send them
Yeah.
to the re-education camps.
but their ideal job would be to just be like think tank operators in a communist regime. That's
No,
like
their ideal jobs is to
perfect
do
ramen
fuck all.
job.
Their ideal jobs is
Yeah.
to do nothing.
Every serious commie envisions that when the revolution comes, they'll be a party member or a civil servant, not breaking rocks or in a collective farm. You'd probably be you'd definitely gain some muscle because you'd be farming corn 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Maybe I don't know. That's happened to
At
Xi
least it'll be
Jinping, right?
at least there won't be pesticides added to it. Of course, it'll half of it will die and you'll starve, but you'd be healthy until you do.
I guess we could, if you even want to argue like farming policies or something. I don't know what your
All right,
point
I
is.
think,
I think that the
we're
global
going to the end
pesticide
here,
regime is
'cause
bullshit, by the
we
way.
we are over the time right now, so I just want to say again, thank you everybody for doing this. Patreon.com/break the rules. Join us, become a patron so we can have more conversations like this. Next week, we are going to have Hotep Jesus coming in on Tuesday. Here is the link. Be sure to subscribe. Then we are going to have Uber Boyo and Jonathan Peugeot talking Nietzsche and Christianity. That is happening on Thursday. And then the following week, we are having Jason Risa Giorgiani and Uber Boyo on. It's sure to be a great time. Again, subscribe, Patreon. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Any last words, by the way, Logo and Styx and Geo?
Oh, are we not going to keep going? I thought
we're ending it right now.
We're ending
Unfortunately,
it?
we're ending
Oh,
it.
you have to go?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay,
I don't know. We
sorry.
didn't really get to debate much. My point was generally that Styx is actually just like a pretty bog standard liberal, right? Like he believes in liberalism. He defends pretty much everything about liberalism, and liberalism leads to the state that we have now. And if you support liberalism, then this is what it looks like. And if you don't like it, it's not because they were influenced by China. It's because this is what your system is.
Styx,
I would
final
rebut that
thoughts.
by saying, first and foremost, Logo, I'd be glad that I got a chance to talk with you. And thank you for being on here as well. This is actually a good conversation.
Yeah, no,
we have
I don't
some
have a
common-
real problem with
yeah,
you.
we
We have a
have
lot
some
in common, and I think I could bring you to the
Yeah.
light if you were interested in reading more books that actually challenge your
Yeah.
worldview.
Well, I mean, I'm too busy editing more books than you read. But here's the thing: we have some common ground. But I do have to say this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, really, I thought it was funny that you were going to challenge me on the books, and you have. But with regards to China, though, I just feel that you're kind of throwing it because
I'm
you
not.
seem to be. Well, I mean, you seem to be an.
I've read
acolyte
more
of Xi
about
Jinping,
this.
So.
I think Xi Jinping is a great statesman. You could tell me why you think
Well,
that's
there you
not
go.
true.
I mean, my conclusion should be just you and your own words.
Well,
No,
he is.
I do.
I think
There's no
that's wrong.
reason
You're
for me to
saying this.
speak.
You suggest that this is like self-defeating, but you haven't actually provided an argument. Like, why am I wrong?
Well, 30 million Chinese people that thought that they would be party members and not in the gulag would disagree with you. So
Are you talking about something that happened 60 years ago?
why not?
Because
Well,
do you think Xi Jinping sent 30 million people to
Holocaust?
gulags? I'm not.
Well, come on,
I'm saying,
Sticks,
what does that
don't
have
go
to do with Xi
down that
Jinping?
road.
No,
That's like blaming Angela
sure that
Merkel
Xi
for
Jinping-
Hitler's
I know,
policies.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make
No,
sense.
Xi Jinping has sent plenty of people to the gulag.
Do you think he sent more than Joe Biden has?
Well, Joe Biden's only been there for a few months. Give him time. Maybe he'll catch up to the commies.
I don't think he has
Okay.
a lot of time
American
left, to tell you the
exceptionalism,
truth.
number one.
All right. By the
Why
way,
are you an American exceptionalist?
Well, because I'm an American.
You live in the
and I'm not a
Netherlands.
traitor. So
Well, Sticks,
So
you go
aren't-
back and forth.
I'm an
from the
American
Netherlands to,
citizen.
Vermont.
Okay.
The Netherlands,
Well, last
the Netherlands
question-
is kind of like a version of America that has less guns anyway. So
It's like, yeah, it's Amsterdam when you could move to New York, which is
no,
New
I'm
Amsterdam.
not in Amsterdam anymore. I'm in Amsterdam.
I know, but you're
I'm
like
next,
in the
I'm next
suburbs
to
of
the
Amsterdam.
I'm next to the border with the Nazis. I got to keep an eye on them now.
Well, one last question instead of my comment. So, Logo, this has come up in the chat numerous times. The question of the Uyghurs and the Falun Gong, that you are minimizing the
Yeah,
sort of
Falun Gong, I
treatment
think,
of
is
them
like
by the Chinese
pretty
state.
disgusting in general. Like, I think that the Falun Gong is like a gross like cult that uses like, it's pretty much indistinguishable from like the general sort of like MK Ultra instrumentalization sort of
Or like
type of
Shinrikyo,
cults.
some people have compared.
Yeah,
them.
and they were specifically created like supported by the West as like a means of like soft power in China. So I really don't see any problem with them banning Falun Gong at all, frankly.
Yeah, but they
And
have
I
been
don't
put in
trust-
like camps and gulags, so they have been horribly suppressed, though, have they not?
Okay, but like, why? What is wrong with sending people who are like basically criminals who are against the public good to like prisons?
Wait, like old ladies.
What's
that
wrong with
meditate?
harvesting their kidneys? and
Well, it's
lungs?
because in the West,
That
people
doesn't
think of
happen. They're
Falun
not
Gong
doing
as like
organ
old ladies
Of course
harvesting.
it does.
that do like
No, it doesn't.
calisthenics.
Wait, Logo, why do you think they're not doing organ harvesting?
We already had this conversation, right? Where you had to prove that they are organ harvesting, and you can't do that
Okay,
because you actually don't know that they're doing that.
Sticks, can you prove that they're organ harvesting?
No,
Okay, so there we go. So it's just hearsay, right?
no,
It's not just hearsay, so you can prove it.
no. I'm saying that what happens in Chinese prisons, you have no clue. So how can you
But
say
you
deliberately?
are
how can you
making
say
a
it doesn't happen?
determinative. No, but okay. So how do you know it doesn't happen
Absolutely.
here?
Well, let me ask you this then: all those organs on the black market, where do they come from?
What
The,
organs on the
United
black
States
market?
doing it?
What are you talking
You realize
about?
you can buy a kidney for like $8,000, right?
Where
On the black market.
are you gonna? What's the black market?
Well, talk to a gang member or a cartel member at some point.
Okay, so where
This
do you
is
think they're
this
getting
is
them?
common
Are they
knowledge. I
gang
don't even
members
think
or
I don't
cartel
even think
members?
that the Chinese government denies this. By the way, they just deny that they're harvesting organs from specifically political dissidents. I don't think they deny that there's a black market for organs in China.
I don't believe that that's true. I mean, you'd have to prove this to me,
Yeah.
but you haven't done this. so.
There is a black market
Well,
ring logo. I mean, that's
it does
I mean, you're being a
exist.
bit
I'm sure there's a
pedantic
black
right
market.
now.
There's a black market everywhere, right? There's
So where do the
criminals
organs come
everywhere,
from?
right?
You have to fresh
don't know,
harvest
man.
them. I mean, you can't just.
I don't
leave
know. I
them-
think
you can't
if it
just
was
bury
my
a
guess,
body and then dig it up 2 days later.
if it was my guess, it would probably be coming from Latin America. If you're talking about gangs and like cartels, and that would make sense to me actually. If the cartels were harvesting organs, that seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, the cartels do harvest organ. That is.
And do you think they're doing that in China? Like, I don't think they're doing it in China. I think that the cartels mostly operate in Latin America, and the cartels are actually under like our sphere of influence, right? Like, we actually supported the cartels, and like the DEA works hand in glove with the cartels. So if you're talking about who's supporting organ harvesting and these sorts of black market activities, you're actually talking about American imperialism.
Well, you do realize the United States is not the only imperialistic country, right?
No, it is.
No,
We are the
China's,
imperial power.
But being the power doesn't mean you're the only one that's imperialistic. It just means you're the
Yeah, it
best at
does.
enforcing that imperialism.
It means that any power that would be challenging you would be definitively the anti-imperialist power.
So
don't
when
you
the
think?
British were at their height, nobody else could be imperialistic. It was just Britain.
They were the best at being imperialists, and that was
What
a
about
different
when the
era of
USSR
imperialism.
existed and was the dipole power to the United States?
You could call the Soviets an empire, I guess. I'm not
Were they
really as interested
imperialistic?
in defending the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union also collapsed.
That's because
for a
they
lot of good
died.
reasons.
Because
I
of
see the pain look
communism.
on Lev's face.
No, I ain't
No,
saying
no, no. The
shit. I
Soviet
ain't saying
Union,
shit.
they failed because they de-Stalinized, and that's what the Chinese said, and that's why Mao actually explicitly said that he supported America.
Well, the
over
Chinese
Soviet Union.
de-Maoized in the 80s, so
Not kind of,
they have
but not
yeah,
really.
no, completely. They have a facade free market, and that's the only reason their economy hasn't collapsed.
It's not a facade. It's just designed. It's just restricted to specific development zones.
Well, Logo, you're a fan of Deng Xiaoping, correct?
Here, I've got to go.
I'm a big
though.
fan of Deng.
Okay, so Styx
Yeah.
has to go. We have to go too, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in.
I wish we had more time.
Patreon.
This
We're
is
gonna get
great.
more time either. I had a fun time. Let's
Yeah,
do
this
it
is
again.
Anytime.
amazing.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Patreon.com/breaktherules.